Welcome back to Switch to Linux. It is Monday and it's time for another Linux Top 5. And today we're going to look at the top 5 VirtualBox tips. So of course this is probably more of a cross-platform. These should work on any operating system that you are running VirtualBox on. Some people of course say, why use VirtualBox? Why not use, the other one, I think VMware or whatever? It's like very simple reason, licensing. You are perfectly legal to use VirtualBox on videos and things like that, but in order to use VMware on videos where you are monetizing, you have to have a commercial license. Pay attention to licensing, read terms and conditions, and things like that. So, today we're going to look at the top 5 tips that you might want to do with VirtualBox. And so, let's go ahead and jump on into these guys. Number 5, guest host interactions. This is sharing your clipboard and sharing your files with drag and drop. The drag and drop seems to work pretty well one direction from from guest to host. I've not seen it work too well from host to guest. However, you can also set it up to share your clipboard. This is disabled by default in VirtualBox because it is indeed a security item. And so you do need to make sure that you are aware of the issue. And if you do need to enable it, you can go ahead and do that. So what we're going to do here is enable you to share the clipboard back and forth and maybe some files back and forth between a virtual machine and your host system. So when you are in your virtual machine settings here, figure out whichever virtual machine you'd like to use. I'm actually going to kick this drive out of there. If you click in on your main settings, then inside of your advanced general settings, you have the option for shared clipboard and for drag and drop, which selects this will select which data will be carried between the guest and the host by drag and drop. It requires guest editions to be installed. So I should test this out on something that actually has guest editions installed. We have our clipboard, which allows you to share your clipboard information. So you can do guest to host, host to guest, or bidirectional. Bidirectional, of course, will allow you to share any of the information. Let me actually go back and reinstall let's see. Okay, so here I started the machine into Tails rather than Ubuntu because Tails actually has your guest editions installed. So if I create a new folder here called folder, I want to copy the name and I can go back to my host system. Now I should be able to paste my name, my information back and forth. So we'll go ahead and change that to host, copy that, come back over here, and I can rename. So apparently my clipboard, of course I have to hit the rename button there to do it. So now I can share my my files back and forth, or my clipboard back and forth. Let's see what happens when we drag our documentation over here. So it looks like I can drag from the machine back over. Let's see what happens. I was not actually able to drag back over here. All was happening on me on this side is that I got the mouse pointer to disappear. Like I said, it works better with the clipboard copying, less dragging and dropping from the host to the guest, but that is certainly an option that you can look into if that is something you need to be able to do. Number 4, under the topic of advanced networking, you can add a variety of different network cards into your virtual machine. The default network card, if we go in and have a look at the settings here, then what we will find is under your networking, by default, it should have the first adapter enabled as a NAT. Okay, you'll see that 2, 3, and 4 are all disabled. This allows pass-through internet, so it's just like another computer is on your network. So if you were to look up your networking and information, you'd see this as a different computer. Now, there might be times when you want a different subnet or a different network. I use this for some development and testing purposes on one of my builds because I'm actually utilizing a Ubuntu web server as my test web server rather than using anything off-site, but it also prevents me from having to have a fairly insecure web server booted on the computer every time I start it. So to do that, you'd want to enable a bridged adapter. Now, to get this to work, you would actually have to come up into your file preferences and under your network, and you have to come over to your host-only networks and create a new adapter. Now, double-clicking on this is going to pull up your settings. So this is now my subnet. So if I were to go into a hosts file, for example, and make an adjustment on my host machine, pointing something at this individual IP address, now that enables the machine to have the network because it still has the NAT, but then it'll allow the host and the guest to interact on this subnet network independently of the main internet. I actually have a video about getting an Ubuntu server set up with this. I'll have to see if I still have it on, because for whatever reason the computer setup would not allow everything to work on this computer. This is in the previous edition of this computer, although I do use it on a regular basis on the other one, so I can't remember if I have all the videos up on getting all this to work. But once you have that set up, and then you come back into your main system here and come down into network, you should then be able to select that as a network. And I want to say it is a host-only adapter you want to use. And then you want to pick the various types of information and then make sure the cable's connected. And this will enable you to have a network that will allow your host and your guest to communicate on that network, and an independent network to connect to the main internet through the rest of your switch and your computer. So that's one of the things that you can do with some more advanced networking on a virtual machine. Number 3, importing and exporting appliances. This is great if you need to do either an offsite backup or moving a machine between different computers. This is the best way to make sure that you have a good backup system. So if I wanted to keep a solid copy of this, for example, my Windows 10, I built out my Windows 10 build on the other computer, and then I ported it over here utilizing this process. So with the virtual machine selected, what you're going to want to do is come back up into your file menu, and there's import and there's export appliance. So if you hit your export, you select which machine you'd like to actually export, and then go into your next step, and this is going to save it as a .ova file. There's a few different formats you can use. I generally just use the default, which makes sure that, I've never had any issues with it. And then when you hit your next, I believe it's going to, okay, this is your basic configuration, and then hit your export button. This is going to export the file. Now this is going to be a large file. Remember, this is like a several gigabyte computer. Of course, it's going to compress down any of the unused data, particularly if you're using your logical volume management. And you'll end up with something that's a few gigabytes at least. So what you do is export this. You're going to get this .ova file, and then what you want to do is port this over to the other computer, or if it's for a backup case, drop that in your backups. Then you want to hit your file import appliance, grab the particular file that it is you are importing, hit import, and it's going to create the whole new machine with all of the same settings that it had before. Now, of course, once you have that in there, you can come up here into your settings. You can make any adjustments in this that you would like to make. Number 2, enabling USB 3 support. By default, the USB 3 support is it's not enabled by default because you need the extensions packs installed. And to make that work, first thing you need to do is make sure that you have the right version of VirtualBox. The extension packs exactly have to match version to version. So come down, find your help menu, find your About VirtualBox, and make sure you have your version number here. So I'm using 5.1.34, the Ubuntu build 12.10.10. So you want to make sure you have note of that, and then you want to head on over to the main VirtualBox website. And then when you are on the website here, then what you're going to do is, if you're on the most recent version, you have all of your different information here. And you want to look for, here's your extension pack, all supported platforms, software developers kit. If you need an older one, like this is running the older version, want to hit the older VirtualBox builds and then select which one you need to run. So since I'm running 5.1, so I need to come down and find the exact one I have, which, yeah, I've already forgotten. But this guy here, it's, whatever one it happens to be. Find the correct version build, and then come down, find your extension pack. And generally, all these are going to be all platforms. So grab the exact version that you have, download the extension pack, and then once you have that extension pack, then what you're going to do is head on back to your machine, come up under Preferences, and then Extensions, and then here is where you want to import an extension. So you can see here I already have the extension pack installed, which is why my USB 3 is working. And hit the Add New Package, and then you want to just install the extension pack that you have downloaded. That's going to take a little bit to install, and once that works, you can jump into your machine, come down to your USB, and enable your USB support. Then, of course, once you do that, then you need to, while the machine's running, generally add the new filter. So when you plug a USB item in, it will be enabled to plug into that virtual machine. So that is how you get your USB 3 support working. Now, I will note that on some Linux systems, USB 3 support on some versions of VirtualBox will cause the machine to not start properly. Just be aware of that, and if you are having a particular problem with a machine and you don't necessarily need that, just go ahead and toggle that USB ports off, and that should run just fine. I have not noted that for a while, but every now and again it will pop up on some build that you are wanting to run. Before we get into our top VirtualBox tip, I'll remind you can help support the channel. You can check me out on Patreon, patreon.com/TomM. We do have other means to support the channel, which you can find at switchtolinux.com/support. And you can pick up t-shirts, coffee cups, mouse pads, and other fun things at shop.switchtolinux.com. Our number one tip is how to increase the virtual machine memory above 128 megabytes. For whatever reason, I have no idea why, VirtualBox seems to want to limit the memory that you can set in the GUI to 128. So if I select a particular machine and I hit my settings and I come down to display, you'll see that I can't go any further than 128. Okay, VirtualBox is capable of doing 256. You can see on my Windows, I have 256 megabytes. Now, to make this work, you need to boot up a terminal, and then what you're going to want to do is run a generic command. Let me go ahead and zoom this terminal in here so we can actually see a little bit better. All right, so we're going to use this general command here, vbox manage modify VM, and then you want to give it the name of the VirtualBox. So in this case, we're going to do the Linux Mint Debian Edition 3. Make sure that the virtual machine is shut off, and then there's a variety of things you can change. In this case, we're going to set the VRAM to 256 by doing --VRAM 256. Hit enter, and now when I come back to my Linux Mint Debian Edition, you will find that I do now have 256 megabytes of RAM. Video RAM there. Why I can't do that in VirtualBox just by scrolling, I have no idea. Just be aware that more video memory, the better you're going to have, the better experience you're going to have. I wish that they would have the ability to just run that slider bar in the GUI all the way up to 256, but it doesn't. But you can still do that through the terminal command. So thanks for watching this top 5 Linux VirtualBox tips video. If it helped you out, consider subscribing to the channel and take a look at the links in the description down below. And I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.